let's talk a little bit about data visualization and its role in data analytics. And to help hammer this point across, let's just take a look at this data set. So let's say that you are in charge of operating a coffee shop. And the coffee shop has several different things they do, right? So they deal in coffee and espresso, they do baked good, they have coffee accessories like, cups and mugs, things like that. They sell packaged tea, and they even have a deli so you could get yourself a lunch along the way. Okay. So first thing you want to take a look at, if we were to just dive into this and just kind of look at the numbers that are here in this structured data table, you would see that, yeah, it looks like our numbers are growing year over year. That's pretty cool. That's a good trend. And it seems pretty obvious. Now, keep in mind, these are numbers in thousands, right? So that's not $798. That's $798,000. It looks to me like coffee and espresso is clearly our number one selling product. But if I were to ask you what our second best and our third best and our fourth best products are, at first glimpse, you might be able to figure it out, especially if you use the totals over here. But if you tell the story of how that's changing over time in this time series data, little bit harder to do. So I don't doubt that you could use your eyes and read these numbers and figure out some interesting metrics that you could use as key performance indicators for this business. But as you share what you've learned as an analyst, as you try to relay your insights, it may be better for you to do that via a data visualization. I'm sure you've heard the old expression, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And sometimes a really well put together data visualization, or in this case, a chart, can tell the story and you don't have to. So it makes it a little bit easier for you to get your point across. So it can either tell the story on its own, or it can help emphasize the story that you're trying to tell with your data, like the insight that you have found with your data. So now, before we dive into how you make a chart, let's just dive into the anatomy of a chart. Now, I'm saying chart, but depending on what class you're in, depending on what area of analytics you're working in, you may hear the word plot. You may hear the word graph. You may hear the word data visualization. Sometimes for our cool guys out there, shortens to viz, right? But ultimately, it's just a chart, or it's an image that represents your data, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create a base chart first to show you a few things, right? So we can get the anatomy of a chart down. So I'm going to start here in cell A4. I'm going to select all my data, not including my aggregation, right? So we don't want our total row here. We don't want our total row there. I'm going to hit the insert tab in the ribbon, and I'm going to go to the chart group. So note that you can make about 1 million different charts in Excel. If you can think of the visualization, you can most likely do it in Excel. But for now, I'm going to go ahead and select column, 2D, column chart, and here you have it. Okay. So now this is a column chart. This is a two-dimensional column chart in Excel. So don't worry about how I made it yet. Don't worry about reading it yet. What I need you to understand is the anatomy of this chart. Okay, so like what are the different parts of this and how do you read it after you know what the parts are? So let's start with the easiest thing. Clearly, that's the chart title. The chart title is just text. You can make that chart title whatever you want. You can literally just click on it and you can type in anything you like. We'll call that sales, which you do have the ability to change the font as well if you so choose. I'll show you how to do that a little bit later. Okay, so the next thing I want to point out is the white area. So this white space on the outside. That white space on the outside is called the chart area. Okay. So I can change the chart area. So if I right click on it, I can change anything about it. I can change the fill color. I can change it to standard patterns. Now, less is more. So I'm not saying that you should do it, but I'm saying that you can do it. So you have the ability to change the chart area. Okay. So the white space that goes around the outside is called the chart area. The inner space, see this line? That's called the plot area. So the plot area is where your data series actually lives. That is also highly customizable. So again, if I right click it, I can change whatever color I want it to be. Now, again, just because I'm changing it doesn't mean that I always need to, but I can. Okay. You have your vertical and horizontal axes. You have your legend. Okay. And you have your data series. Now, every single thing I showed you can be customizable here. So data series, I can edit the data series all at once. See them changing? Or I can edit the data series one data point at a time. And that'll change as well. Or here, let's do this one so you can see it. Okay. So that's just the basic anatomy. Let's review real quick, okay? Chart title, chart area. That's the white space. Plot area, data series, vertical axis, horizontal axis, legend. Okay, that's it. So now that we've gone through the basics, let's talk about reading this chart a little bit. So first thing, our original visual analysis is pretty dead on, right? So I mean, clearly it's a coffee shop and we're selling more coffee than everything else. Okay. So because of that, it kind of looks like it's skewed pretty badly, right? So I mean, just huge here. And yes, there's an upward trend that we're seeing. So there's a couple different ways you could deal with telling this story. You could leave it and explain what I just explained to you, or you could split them off and you could have a a chart that shows you just coffee and it's changing over time. And then you could have an additional one that shows you everything else. You have the ability to do that. You could look at every year. You could look at year every other year. There are a lot of different ways that you can slice and dice this up in order to tell that story. Let's dive into it a little bit. So first thing we may want to do is, what if we wanted to look at the breakdown of how much in a year we are selling? So what the percentages are within a year of our earnings. So the best way to tell that story is with a pie chart. So if I click 2021 and I select my coffee and espresso and all the values that go with it, it's going to clearly tell you that same thing, right? So, hey, this is coffee and espresso. Now, the first thing you're seeing that probably doesn't play nice with you is that the labels aren't really there. There are no clearly defined labels. So if you don't like the design, not necessarily the plot, but the design that you're doing, you've got a couple different ways you can change it. So once you create a chart, you have a contextual menu that pops up inside the ribbon. See it says chart design right here? You also have another one called format. They're both very handy. Okay. So within the chart design pop-up, that only happens when you have a chart selected. So see, now it's gone. There it is. So within that chart design, you have a couple different options. So first of all, you've got a quick styles gallery. So you see chart styles. So within there, I can just go and kind of click through and it's going to automatically add formats that might be handy for me. Okay. So I'll give you a little pro tip. Usually the pre-built-in designs in Excel don't get you where you want to go. See, it's not quite taking us where we need to be. Usually doesn't get you there. But what you have the ability to do is you can use these to get you close. So often what I'll do is I'll find a design that's close to what I want it to be, that's similar or somewhere within the vision that I think would be handy. And I'll just click that and then I'll kind of dig from there. Okay. So that's one option. So for example here, now that just doesn't look good because the chart's too small. And I have the ability to click these and I can explode it out. For example, I can bring it back in. I can move these around. Now, obviously that's white on white. So this would be an example where I might want to change the chart area. Okay. So I can go in and I can change that chart area and I can make it a different color. And all of a sudden that white might not be so bad. Now I said it and the white is still pretty bad, but we can change that too. See it? So I'll take this out and I can make this whatever I want it to be. Okay. So a couple other things. What if you don't like the pre-made templates? What if you just want to take it back to normal? Well, you can do that. Just do something simple. Let's go back here. Ooh, no, don't like that one. There, it's getting worse. Okay, there we go. We'll stick with that. So you've got a couple other options. You can manually adjust your layout by going to quick layouts. There you go. So there's one with nothing. You can add additional chart elements as you like. So as I move this around, see how they're moving? That's what we want. So we wanted something like that. So I can go to add chart element and inside my data labels, I can move all those around. I can move my legend around or take it away. I can move my chart title around or take it away. Okay. All things that make it handy. Just understand, for analysis purposes, if you want to show the breakdown of how each individual category is contributing towards a yearly sales, clearly a pie chart is a good way to be. What if you wanted to look at something different? So what if you wanted to look at sales as a trend? Okay, what if we wanted to look at sales as a trend? So if we wanted to look at sales at a trend, the best chart to display time series data or how things change over time would be a line chart. Okay, so I went to insert and I went to line chart. So line charts are really handy because they show how data changes over time. So they're really good when you have a time dimension of your data, which you do, right? 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024. So now when I created this, here's what I did. I selected all of my 2021 through 2025, and then I selected coffee and espresso. I went to my line chart and it showed me that. Easy enough, right? Clearly upward trend. Now there are a couple other things I could do. So if I wanted to look at all of the trends, well, see how it kind of gets off a little bit? So this is actually not incorrect. But when I look at it, it's hard to read because, again, coffee and espresso sells so much more than everything else, which makes sense because it's a coffee store. So if I look at it, I see an upward trend of coffee sales. But because I'm selling so much more, nearly 800,000 first year, everything else is clearly blown away. So maybe I could do something different. What if I wanted to visualize and not use coffee and espresso? How would I go about doing that? Okay, we can make that happen. What if we wanted to look at things that might be more comparable, like the bakery versus the deli? How are we doing selling sweets versus selling sandwiches? Well, we could do that. Here's what we'll do, and here's what you'll need to remember. Excel reads left to right, top to bottom. So if I wanted to make a non-continuous selection, that's what we're about to do. I'm going to start here in cell A4, and I'm going to select all of my dates, 21 through 25. I'm going to hold down Control, and then I'm going to go down to bakery, and I'm going to select all of my bakery. And I'm going to keep holding Control. The Control key on your keyboard works both on Mac and PC. I'm going to go down to deli, and I'm going to select it here. Now, a word to the wise, if you're on a Mac, you may have a Command or a Control button, or maybe both, depending on your Mac. Either way, Command and Control are often interchangeable. So if you don't have a Control key on your Mac, then use the Command key, and it'll do the same thing that the Control key is doing on Excel. So notice I've selected all of my dates. I've selected all of bakery. I've selected all of deli. I'm going to go to insert and let's do some exploration. So I'm going to go 2D column chart first. Now we're talking. While I'm in there, let's do that again. Hold down Control. Hold down Control still. And we'll do another line. And now we see some interesting analysis. Okay. So first thing we see is it kind of looks like deli has had a slight decline. It looks like bakery has been on a steady incline. And if you wanted to look at it differently, well, you could see it here and you definitely see them. And it's actually not a terrible thing. They're kind of starting to converge, which is a pretty good thing. Okay. So you're seeing a trend. Now, if you wanted to see the trend that I was just explaining, there's a couple things you could do here. So if I click on the chart, I can go to add chart element and I actually have the option of adding a trend line. Now, there are a couple different kinds of trends. So there's more than just linear trends. There's exponential trends and moving averages. But for now, we'll just stick with linear trend line. And we'll apply that to bakery. And you see that change that's happening there. Okay. So really easy to get going. Now, there's a lot. As you expand and as you continue your data journey, there are so many things you can do with visualizations in Excel. There's so many things you can do with plotting and scatter plots. What I encourage you to do is to dive in and simply explore. Explore different ways to tell your story with your data. There are more than just line charts and column charts and pie charts, right? There's a lot of different things we can do. So for example, we could do things like tree maps. So what is this doing for you? So this is showing you via box size what the biggest contributor to your earnings would be. So see this big blue box? That's telling you that the most amount of money that you've made has come from coffee and espresso. And then each one past that, it's showing you via representation of size. So the more you've sold, the bigger the boxes are that you see here. Okay. So what I encourage you to do is I encourage you to explore the data. I encourage you to explore going through and making different visualizations to tell this story that you want to tell. Now, there is a couple other things I want to show you, though. So let's just look at coffee and espresso for a second. So actually, let's make it even easier. What if we just wanted to look at coffee and espresso for 2024 and 2025? We could do that. So we're going to start here. We're going to go here and here. And here we have coffee and espresso 2024, 2025. Clearly, we've had an increase. So I want to talk to you about how you tell your story with your data. And this will be the last thing we talk about because this video is getting pretty long. So if you look at this, there are a lot of good things happening, right? So between 2024 and 2025, we've had an increase in sales of coffee and espresso. We're a coffee shop. That's a great thing. The challenge with it is the auto scale that happens in Excel. So you'll notice that the biggest number that we have in our data set is 1,385. Keep in mind that's numbers in thousands, so that's 1,385,000. So all Excel does is it just goes up a little bit. So it'll go up maybe like 5 or 10% higher than whatever the highest number is in your data set. And it sets that as the maximum number in your axis. Okay. So it's saying the vertical axis highest number is 1.4 million. Okay. So to the everyday person that's not the data analyst, if you were to look at this, you know what you'd think? You would just automatically assume it's kind of like a fundraiser, right? So when it gets to the top, we hit our goal. So like in 2025, we're really close to our goal, right? That's not necessarily true, at least not the way the data is telling you right now, because we don't know. So let's say our goal was actually $2 million in sales. If our goal for 2025 was $2 million in sales, we didn't get it. We're short. Okay. So the reason that you don't see that in this chart is because that scale inside your vertical axis just auto set to 1400. So what are you going to do? If I right click, I have the ability to edit the scale of this. Okay. So if I select this, I have the ability to see it, format major grid lines, format axis. I can change these things. So I'm going to click format axis. Now over here on the right hand side, what's going to happen? So what I'm going to see is, and I might be able to move this over. Here we go. So I just grabbed this and moved it over so you can see it. This is the format chart pane. You'll see that the maximum value is automatically set to 1400, but it's actually not what we want. So we're going to make that 2000. And when we do that, now we see a totally different story, right? All of a sudden we look and go, well, there wasn't that big of a gap between 2024 and 2025. And we were actually pretty far off of our goal, huh? Yeah. So just a little bit into data storytelling with data visualizations in Excel. I encourage you to dive into this sample file that's available on your LMS, right? Your learning management system, and practice, practice, practice. It makes perfect. And as you're going through it, try to put yourself in the shoes of the data analyst. As you find your data insights, how are you going to tell that story to somebody else? Okay. So with that, my friends, I'll let you go. Look forward to talking to you again soon.